Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. Wanted to set up so that you could actually see this extraordinary piece behind me, but I haven't had a chance yet to put the hooks in and really do it quite right. So I was having to shift things around, but I wanted to make sure that there was actually some space over here so you could see the extraordinariness that is this vortex that my incredibly talented and gifted and generous sister friend, created for me, but she actually created it for all of you for when I make videos like this, so that there's this incredible piece that goes with it. So I'm mildly distracted by it. It's okay if you're a little distracted by it. Just let yourself get totally sucked into the vortex and let my voice waft in the background. So welcome, welcome as you are joining. I would love it. I would love it if you would just drop a little, emoji or a little comment in the comments here, a little wave, say hi. Let me know where you are joining from, so I get a sense of where we are touching in from. Sometimes it's all super concentrated and we're all here like in California in the United States, and then other times, depending on the time that I go live, I get Australia and East Coast and Europe, and I would just love to see your faces, see your names, where you are dialing in from. Is that a thing? Yay! Got Jenna here, also on the west coast of California, joining in my little vortex space here. And I also am having like a little hair situation going on. I was writing out the whole like quarantine hair for a while, and then it just like hit a point and I was like, I have too much hair. So I tried to kind of pile it up here, and then I just didn't want to touch it, even though when I sat in front of the camera, I thought this is not exactly what I was going for, but not going to touch it. Gonna leave it alone. So welcome again, welcome. And as always, actually, as I get kind of going here, I'd love to hear how what I'm saying is landing, if it's landing, if it's like a hell yes, high five. That's always awesome. But Dana said she just bleached her hair, so I'm considering whether I should do this. You can't see because now it's on top of my head, but I added some pink to the part that is bleached. But then it really highlights this part at the front that's all brown, and then I have gray, So I've been trying to decide whether to home bleach my hair or just like ride it out. I don't know. I love the blonde. I love the pink. I have like also a tropical fish pink, like a super, super pink. That if I did bleach this, then I could like go really bright pink. That would be exciting. My daughter always gets jealous because she wants to dye her hair, but she's 7.5, and her dad says not until she's a teenager. And so I don't care so much, but I'm backing his play on that one. So yeah, so as we get going, thank you for joining in the comments, letting me know, if you have questions or comments or shares or how this relates to your life. Because what I really want to talk about is this piece of not waiting for permission. Not waiting for permission. I just realized I left my notes in the shower. I think I've talked about it in here. I take my little notes, like when I'm taking a shower, they're on my Aqua Notes. I'm going to leave them there. I'm just going to say what's in my heart to say and trust that it is enough. But I remember the first time that this piece around permission really became explicit for me. think it had been living. You know, I think for many of us, there's some realm of this piece. Obviously, as children, there's a lot of asking for permission and what have you. But even as adults, might live in the background, probably lived in the background for me. I'm thinking about, as I'm getting a little distracted by this, but the way in which where we make decisions from and whether they make sense to other people. When I was in college, I left college. I was really, really miserable. And in my first year of college, and I ended up leaving college and I went and lived in a Buddhist monastery. And I avoided calls from my mother for about 2 weeks because I wasn't willing to. I wrote her a letter and I told her I was leaving college. And so I wasn't willing to not do what was right for me to do. And I didn't ask my parents for permission. But I also wasn't willing to face the the relational consequences of following what was true in my heart of leaving college. So I just avoided her calls for 2 weeks. And so, you know, there's this piece, like, in whose permission are we waiting for? Whether we're sort of asking explicitly, you know, for some of us, if we have a partner, we want to do something around the house, there's like, is this okay with you? Sometimes, of course, that permission can be true collaboration, right? Like, well, this is our house together. And of course, you know, I want it to feel good to you, and I want, you know, they want it to feel good to you, and that there's just true collaboration. And sometimes it can get masked as collaboration. Like, well, of course I'm asking for permission. You know, I wouldn't want them to just change something about the house without talking to me first. And so that place of a kind of soul searching, if you will, or just bringing awareness practice into the places where, if I want something, or I want to do something, or I want to wear something, or I want to dye my hair pink, or do I pause? Is there anyone whose approval I am either hoping for or waiting for? Do I subtly drop hints along the way? You know, I'm thinking of doing this. Look at them and sort of see, you know, gauge their response. Is that okay with them? Will they like it? So a lot of the ways that I think that there are many people who would say that they're not necessarily, like, I'm not waiting for anyone's permission. And more often than not, if we really dive into people's behavior, there are a lot of places where there's like a subtle sort of sensing. And again, there's just what's like beautiful, caring about other people, caring about our impact on other people, and the way that sometimes that can mask itself, or kind of waiting, asking for permission can sort of mask itself as like, well, I don't want to impose, right? You know, I just want to care about my impact on them. And it's so tricky because that, of course, like, that's so important and so beautiful. And we do impact people, and especially in relational dynamics, not just intimate relationship, but with our children or at work, or with our families, or, you know, just all these different places. But to really finally begin to tease out, where am I waiting for permission, or where am I holding myself back? Where am I hiding parts of myself? And then kind of painting it up in the guise of collaboration, or caring what they think, or wanting to take responsibility for my impact, and just really teasing those apart to be able to see them for what they are. So it's really subtle and unconscious ways that this can come about. And I remember teaching a class one day. There was a period of time probably around 2005, give or take a couple years here or there, where the company that I co-founded with my ex-husband it became Authentic World. At the time, we called it Authentic SF because we were based in San Francisco. And so the idea was authentic relating, and we were in San Francisco. So Authentic SF. And our logo actually was the bridge. It was the Golden Gate Bridge. And so it was partly because it was like, here we are, we're Bay Area, we're the consciousness community, what have you. But the idea also was that our intention wasn't just balls out, like authentic expression for authentic expression's sake, but that actually what we wanted to bring and to teach was to be a bridge between like all these incredible teachings of the consciousness communities into quote unquote mainstream culture, or just more, and so there was a period of time in about 2005 where we were leading workshops and teaching classes for a dating company called Table for Six. I don't know if any of you ever heard of it or ever knew about it. And so we would lead these afternoon experiences, was one of the ways we would do this. And the thing about the membership of Table for Six, so we were like in our early 20s at the time, like mid 20s. And the membership of Table for Six was typically a little bit more like my age now, which is 42. But they were more in like between 30 and 50. And they tended to make more money than we made at that time, have pretty like solid income, solid jobs, own their homes, often had been married and divorced. Not all of them had kids, but there was just this there was like a different general milieu, if you will, of the people who came to these events than like our 20-something authentic relating events that we would lead out of our loft space in San Francisco. And I remember really specifically with this group that there was this, we did an exercise where we had them introduce themselves to each other and ask each other questions to kind of get to know the person next to you. And it went how you would typically expect it to go when you get, a little bit more of a networking vibe, or people, hi, what's your name? What do you do? Where do you live? And kind of like, meh, like that was all right. Like, it's kind of interesting to meet this person. We'd have them talk about how it went. And then we would have them, I think, turn the other direction. So they're meeting like a new person and basically say, now you're allowed to ask this person anything that you want. And the only rule is you have to be genuinely curious. So we're not going to ban you from asking where they live or what their job is or what they do for work or, what their hobbies are or anything like that. But we would lead them through a process of connecting with their genuine curiosity and then say, so you can ask this person anything, but you need to be genuinely curious to know the response from this person. And the person responding, can answer the question fully. They can give a shorter version, or they can say, I don't feel comfortable answering that question, which then gives a lot of permission to really ask whatever you want. And the room would just come alive. We could feel it even as facilitators, right? Like the conversation was just, there was more laughter and there were less pauses, these quiet pauses, and the room would just come alive. And then we would ask them afterwards, so how did that go? What was different? And we've been hearing some variation on this for some period of time. But I remember this one afternoon, I literally can I don't know exactly where we were in San Francisco, but I can envision the conference room we were in. And, and some guy raised his hand. He was like, well, you gave us permission to ... And I was like, oh my God, this is the crux of it. This is the crux, is that actually, I don't know if every single person in the entire room loved the second exercise better than the first one, or really wanted to connect that way. Maybe some of them felt uncomfortable, or, these pieces. But basically, we had 50 people in a room, and the majority of them liked the second exercise better. And they were like, yeah, it felt so good when we had permission, and I was glad, and I liked asking, and the questions were so much more interesting, and I got to know this person better, and it just sort of went on like that. And I thought, look at how you were all waiting for permission, and the person next to you was also waiting for permission too. And so, me and my other facilitators, we got to be sort of like the I don't know, super ego or whatever above that goes like, and now you have permission to ask your genuinely curious questions, or to ask about what you actually want to know about rather than what you think you should ask, or what you should find out about this person, given that you're at like a dating mixer. And everybody had a better time. And so that was the first time it really popped as like from the back of my mind kind of a thing into the front, like this way in which so many people were just waiting for permission to be who they are, to be who we are, to ask what we want to ask, to have the conversation, to like be genuinely curious about another person, to relate in the way that they wanted to relate with each other. And I kind of carried this breadcrumb forward because there was, again, this very kind of chronic, I don't know if I'll call it complaint, but like, and it's not even really a criticism. There's another word, but we would teach authentic relating, and then there was this chronic question that would come up with that was like, yeah, but what about here? And it would always, someone would be like, yeah, well, that's all fine and good, in this little authentic relating circle you've got going on here. But I can't do this at work. Or like a young guy going like, yeah, but I can't do this on a first date. Or, there was just always like a, yeah, but not here. Or like, yeah, but the people in my neighborhood don't like to relate like this. And I saw it enough over time. And why I loved having had that experience with Table for Six was that they often looked and sounded and on paper seemed like the yeah, but people. Like they were the corporate attorneys, and they were the CEOs, and they were the, divorced with 4 children, and they were the homeowners, and they lived in the wealthier neighborhoods, and they were like the yeah, but category. And consistently, again, not 100% of the people that came to our events from Table for Six loved it. Some were like, that was not for me, which is fine. But what I really, really learned over time with that was that there was no type of person who didn't want to have a real conversation in some way, shape, or form. There wasn't a person, like there wasn't a demographic, there wasn't an age demographic, a racial demographic, like a gender, sex, sexual orientation demographic, like a wealth demographic, a type of job demographic, a role within an organization demographic. It wasn't like, well, everybody except CEOs likes to be authentic, or everybody, as long as they make less than $100,000, they like to be authentic or curious or have these real conversations. And again, consistently over time, working with so many different types of people and seeing their consistently be this yeah, but again, it ultimately ended up this thing of like I want someone to give permission so that, so that I don't make a fool of myself, so that I'm not rejected. And it often, again, it's this funny place where it often gets mapped over into like, well, I don't want to offend. But there's like this huge range between, what is often what sort of like, so where are you from and what do you do? And to that, and like, where people are like, well, I can't ask about, their sexual preferences on the first date. I'm like, why would you even jump all the way there? Number one, that's not true. There are absolutely people who want to talk about their sexual preferences on their first date. And there's like this, so many people I experienced like using like the far ends of the pole to somehow justify why they couldn't be themselves at work, with their coworker, on a first date, with these people, with those people, with their family, in their neighborhood, with the other moms at the school, with the other dads at the school, with the, like with the soccer coach, like whoever it was. And what I really came to realize is like 2 things. One is there's this magnificent opportunity that we have when we realize that, again, I don't know if I can truly say the majority of people. I have not met the majority of people. All I can say is the majority of people that I have met in my life, and that is a lot of people, especially teaching and facilitating and, holding workshops of like hundreds of people over now almost 20 years, it's a lot of people. The majority of those people are also waiting for permission and actually really want to have that real conversation. And the opportunity that we have is actually to be the permission giver. Like if I'm sitting here and then, the person sitting at the bar next to me and I'm like, oh God, like I hope they'll just, do something that lets me know that they want to talk to me, or that it's okay to talk to them, or that which is basically just waiting for permission. I'm hoping they'll do something that will make it obvious that it's okay for me to turn to them and be like, hey, so I find, like, I'm really curious about you, or such and such about you sparks my interest, or, I've noticed blah, 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 and I'm curious about da, 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 or, hey, is it okay if I ask you, a question that might seem random, but I'm waiting for some signal. Again, it might be a stranger. I'm waiting for a signal, like my coworkers are all supposed to give me a signal that they actually want to talk about, deeper things. This is the other way that I see it. There's like a meme that goes around that's like, I hate small talk. I'm like, yeah, everybody fucking hates small talk. And small talk also serves a purpose, but I'm not going to go into that right now. But like, if everybody in your social sphere is like, I hate small talk, I only want to talk about the deep stuff. It's like, well, then why aren't you talking about it? Why aren't you talking about it? And that person next to me is probably also waiting for me to give them permission, or for maybe they're hoping the person on the other side of them will talk to them and they're not really interested in me. They haven't noticed me at all, but they're waiting for permission too. And so we actually, if instead of walking through the world like, who's going to give me permission to be me? Who's going to say it's okay to be as weird as I am, to laugh as loud as I do, to find the weird things that I find funny, to geek out on the nature of the universe with me, to talk about death and plants and birth and, is someone going to give me a sign that I could actually walk the world going like, oh, I could be that sign for the other people that I come in contact with. I could be the person who asks the first awkward question. I could be the person who shares a little bit deeper than where it seems like everybody is at, rather than assuming that just because that's the conversation that's happening, that's actually what people want. I could be the person who's like, hey, what's really going on right now is da 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 da, like my kid won't sleep, and I had a big fight with my partner, and got this funny little twinge in my hip, and you don't have to like vomit on people, everything, but you could be the person who's like, what's really going on, or what I'm really curious about, what really like sparks my curiosity, or what I've been reading about, or like whatever it is that you were hoping the conversation would be about. That's not the surface small talk. You actually have the opportunity to be the permission giver. And one of the things that does is it takes the attention off ourselves to some extent. Instead of being like, oh my God, are they going to like me? Are they going to like me? Am I going to be too weird? Do they want to talk about what I want to talk about? Da, 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 da. Then we go like, oh, what if I'm actually the person who's here to give permission? Not like as a bestower or a grantor, but like, oh, I could be the one who goes first. I could be the one who goes first. And there was another one that I was going to share. I can't remember. I was going to touch in on here and say, Mia, let's see, the comments, Mia said, so you censor yourself. I don't mean, if you're willing to share here, Mia, like, I don't know if there's a particular area of life that you tend to censor yourself, or about certain things, or what comes up that has you really like what is your kind of quote unquote excuse? And I say that with zero shame, blame, or judgment, but we all have like, oh, well, I don't want to take up too much space, or like, oh, I don't want to offend anybody, or, oh, like we have all these really positive intention reasons. And it's helpful sometimes to just know what are our reasons, because we go like, oh, I'm hoping to not offend. Like, well, if I ask them about this, like, I'm pretty sure that's not offensive. And I trust that they could actually say if it is. They could say if it is. Oh, Nikki's here. I don't know if you're still here, Nikki. I love you too. And John Morgan said, amazing how we learn genuine curiosity is not okay. Yeah. I do not really know where that comes from. And if it's that we learn that curiosity is not okay, or we learn something about, because I find one of the interesting things about curiosity is that there's a vulnerability, even though we're maybe asking another person a question or we're putting attention on them, that it reveals my interest in the other person. And it also reveals, like, one of the reasons that I love actually that game. Like, we used to play that game all the time. Like, all right, so, ask me anything, but you have to be genuinely curious. And I was always like, oh, I want to be asked. I want to be asked. I want to be asked. And most people actually felt that way. Most people were like, oh, I love being the one who's asked the questions. Is it also reveals the other person's genuine curiosity about us. Like, it revealed, like, what do you want to know about me? Everybody wants to talk about themselves. Everybody, not everybody. Most people want to talk about themselves. And so, to be the permission giver in that way also, so many people are just like waiting to be given an opportunity to share about themselves, to be seen in that way, to be deeply listened to. So it's rare that people are offended. It's rare that people are offended. Oh, you are here, Nikki. I'm so happy. I love you so much. So I really want to run and get my notes. I wrote myself these 2 examples I want to talk about, and they're on my little notepad that I have in the shower, because that's where I get all my good ideas. But there's a couple things I think are so important about this. And then I'll probably just pull it around and leave it at be the permission giver for now. And noticing. So maybe the first thing I'll say is that it's really valuable to notice, like, am I waiting? And the first layer might just be, am I holding back? Right? And we might not think I'm waiting for permission. That might not land as the first layer, but like, oh, I'm holding back. And then often what will show up is like, well, yeah, I'm hoping that this can be one of the things, even in terms of, I see this in long-term relationships, even like initiating sex, that both people will often, like, if I work with couples, a lot of times what I find is both people are kind of like going, like, in their minds, they're not saying out loud, but like, do they want to have sex tonight? Like, do they want to have sex tonight? I can't tell, like, and they're basically they're looking for permission to just make the first move. And then both people, this is like chronically something that people come to me about, is like, they want to have more, different, better, more of what they want, kind of sex or intimacy. And then they find out that actually the other person wanted it all along, and they're like, how did I not know? But you didn't seem like you wanted it. And so again, rather than just there's the place of asking, right? Like, hey, you want to have sex tonight? But there's also a point, and this is where, in a long-term relationship, like just an initiation, right? Like a reaching towards or a leaning in, where, of course, a stranger at a bar, like, you're not going to lean over and just start kissing them and find out what happens, right? That's the difference between permission and consent, that just waiting and assuming, like, well, I'm sure they don't want to talk to me. But like, hey, can I ask you a question that might seem like it's out of left field? And then pay attention. If they're like, yeah, I don't want to talk right now, like, just believe them, and walk away, go talk to someone else. But if they're like, yeah, sure, or whatever it is, then ask them your genuinely curious question and pay attention again, like, does it seem like they get super, super awkward? And even you can name that, and be like, oh, it seems like maybe that was too personal of a question. Is that true? Right? Like, you can get curious about their response. You can get curious about their response rather than assuming that you know. So noticing our own awareness, because it happens, it's not just with like new people or in the typical places like with the boss and what have you, but we do it with our intimate partners, we do it with our family. We assume how our family wants to relate to us, what they want to know about us, what's okay, how it's okay to be and not be, rather than like, what if I like be me and talk about what I'm interested in and share all the different parts of me, and then like pay attention to what is the response, what kind of, and even ask about that, get curious, like, hey, it seems like that was uncomfortable, or what was it like for you to hear that about my life? Or, these are ways to open up the conversations with the people who are already in our life. I remember probably one of my favorite testimonials. This was my very first coaching client ever. from like, again, it's like 2005 or something. I'm not going to say his name, but I know exactly who it is. I can see him. And I remember after a period of time, he said to me, he's like, I came to you because I thought I wanted, basically he thought he wanted like new people in his life because he wanted a certain kind of relating. And what he realized through working with me was that he already had those people in his life. And clearly I still remember it 15 years later. Like that was one of the best testimonials I ever got, because that more likely than not, for most of us, that is true. There may be people who we drift away from or who fall away, or we realize that that we just have a habit of relating or things like that. But more often than not, what we find when we start really bringing ourselves is that the people around us actually change, and that they're often more, they're more like us in those ways, like in terms than we thought. There's this idea, and I actually dislike, it's often sort of perpetuated in personal growth circles, this idea of like, you go to a weekend and you're like, well, you've changed, but the people in your life haven't. And so, somehow we need to safeport them or something around that. And it's often those people in our life, first of all, they already knew those things about us, and it's why they liked us in the first place. And or they were just waiting, like they were hoping for that kind of relating with us as well. And it's a big part of just this subtler realm of where we're actually empowered to have and create and be in the kind of relating and conversations and relationships we want to be in. It's a big part of the reason that I created Relationship by Design, and then ultimately created Relationship by Design Fundamentals, is to like get down to just the bare bones of it's like what I would call the cornerstones or the pillars of, but how do I do that? It's just like a nice idea, right? Some of you might watch it, well, it's a nice idea. And you might be having even some of those like, yeah, but what about this area of my life? Or like, yeah, but what about this person? Or yeah, but what about in this circumstance? And so I was always wanted to do Relationship by Design Fundamentals calls live, so that there's these pieces to bring in to work with, the fundamentals, the cornerstones, the teaching pieces, and then ultimately to do live, in person, in the moment coaching, because they say the devil's in the details. And I always want to find like a better phrase than the devil's in the details, but the real transformation is in the details. The way that we really want to bring this into our life is like, this totally makes sense. I totally understand. I get it in the abstract. I can do it here. But what about this relationship that seems like it really isn't like that? Or, but what if this person does this? Or, and actually work that out in real time so that this can apply to your real life. And honestly, like one of my big hopes in the world is it's like one of them is really around you, like the broader you who might actually hear this and listen to this or take this on in some way, having the kind of conversations, relationships, relating that you want to have and feeling empowered to do that. And then I have this hope for all of us who have the resources, who come in contact with this kind of work or relating, to become the permission givers. Because if we go out and, oh, it's Melissa, and become the permission givers in our lives, be the first ones to reveal, to share, to take a leap of maybe being or seeming weird or out there. And then so often what really happens, people are like, oh my God, me too. I didn't think there was anybody else like me in this town or at this company or, in this dating pool or whatever. Like I thought I was the only one. And as soon as we start becoming the permission givers, it's like, oh my God, actually, not only is it me and you, but like we just found out it's this person and this person and this person too, and like wahoo, so exciting. Life becomes so much more exciting. And like when I talked about in that example at the very beginning, how the room came alive when they became the permission givers by asking about what they were genuinely curious about. the room came alive. And I guess I just really believe like we have the potential to do that for the whole world, just like the whole world can start with our little home and our little community and our little town, on our little company and our little grocery store or something. I think maybe I'll end on this note. Mia said it's a really timely topic. I'm so glad. I'm glad it's landing there for you, and I hope that it. I hope there's pieces in this you can pull out and make really applicable to your own life. But it reminds me, I shared this story on Facebook recently about the postmaster at the post office here in the tiny little town that I live, and basically sharing with him about like me and my family and how we're super weird about, like, my partner found a dead owl and brought it home and we buried it. And then he found a dead king snake and now it's in alcohol, like in his garage. But before that, my daughter like wore this snake around her neck for an entire day. She brought it in my house. I was like, no, like, you go on with your bad self, but that snake does not come in the house. But like these things that we think make us weird, and where there was this really sweet connection I had, with basically, someone that I could just write off as like, oh, well, that's just supposed to be this kind of relationship. He works in the post office, I'm over here, and we should just keep it surface. And it was so sweet. It was such a sweet conversation. And I think about this, it's like, it is where it comes up on a first date, or even on like if you're on a dating app, like as you start to relate, or, and then all these into the long term of our relationships as well. But I think about it when I go to the grocery store, and there's these people who have to talk to other people all day long, and basically have to be nice. And they're like, how are you doing today? And that, no, of course I don't want to just vomit all over them because they're stuck behind the cash register, and it wouldn't be fair to like trap them in a conversation that they can't really opt out of. But how often we actually have the opportunity to pause and, again, be the permission giver, to not just be like, fine, how are you, and not really look at them, but like look somebody in the eye and be like, yeah, it's been a rough day today. Like, how about yourself? And there's that way of bringing in the authentic, bringing in what's real, creating a moment of real connection that gives that person the opportunity to say like, yeah, it's been a rough day for me too. Or to be like, oh, so sorry to hear it. Like, here's your groceries. And they're not trapped. They don't have to listen to anything else. They don't have to drop into a place of authenticity, but they can. And we have the opportunity to walk around and just, in all those moments, like actually offer a little bit more connection, and in that way, like, nourish our own selves. It's such an infinity loop of like, in some way it's so selfish because it's like, this is how I want to talk to people all the time. And it's what I hear from people all the time is like, I don't want to do small talk. How, everybody else seems like they just want to talk about the surface. What am I supposed to do if, I had a conversation with a client recently about, they were like, and how do I answer the question? Like, how are you? I don't know. I hate that question. How do I, and I was like, just answer the question you wish they'd asked, right? That's being the permission giver. Someone says like, so how are you? And you go like, well, what it's like really going on in my life right now is ... Or I'm feeling this way. Like, if you wish they would ask about your feelings, just answer about your feelings. And again, you can titrate, you can modulate, in the sense of, you don't have to be like, oh, I wish they'd asked me my deepest, darkest secrets, and I'm just gonna like bleh, all over like this person I just met. But they say like, so how are you today? And you're like, well, I've been thinking a lot about blah, 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 whatever it is. I've been thinking a lot about how hummingbird wings work. And for some reason, my heart feels really sad today. How are you feeling? Right? Like, just a little, and then you see, like, do they just step forward? Like, well, that's really interesting. They lean in just a little bit. Do they meet you? Or do they sort of like get one of those shell-shocked looks and go like, I have to go to the bathroom. And you're like, cool. They didn't want to go there. That's totally fine. It's totally fine. No biggie. So let me just check in here. Dana said, surface is protection from abuse or validates privacy. I hate this Starbucks approach. Insert name here. I avoid Starbucks for this reason. I don't totally get that, although I have this hilarious, I don't know why. Somebody sent this to me right at the beginning of quarantine, and it was exactly what I needed. It's a Starbucks, it's a picture of a Starbucks cup. And it says, where you have the name, it says CARK. And the caption is, I told them my name was Mark with a C. Oh, it made me laugh so hard. It still apparently makes me laugh. But I mean, what I get about Surface is protection from abuse, or just that there, that you can validate people's privacy by just titrating, right? Just giving that little bit, depending on the relationship. I mean, the thing is, this is the tricky thing, is that people use that as their excuse a lot. And this is not for you, Dana, at all. But just people, I hear it like, oh, but I want to, honor where people are at. But most of the time, we're actually not honoring where people are at, because we're making assumptions about them and going like, I'm sure they don't want to, or it's clear from their body language, or without ever having revealed and given them the opportunity to step in or step out. And people do that, even about like their friend circles. They're just sure, there's a woman in the collective right now who's like, well, my friends just seem to want to go to bars. I mean, this is before quarantine, I guess, but, and talk about men, and I just don't want to do that anymore. And so I guess this isn't my friend circle anymore. And I was like, that's totally fine. And it's totally possible. And it's totally valid. And you can make whatever decision you want. And have you given them an opportunity for something else? Even going out to a bar but then again, answering the question you wish they'd asked, or reaching out to a few of those people and being like, hey, I'd love to have, just a little bit more intimate evening at home where it's not so loud, because I'm so curious to hear more about what's going on in your life than just what's going on with you and the men in your life. Or like, have you actually given them this opportunity? Have you been the permission giver? But then I absolutely think, especially with people who are sort of trapped at Starbucks or at the grocery store or the post office, or that it's important to make sure that we're giving obvious outs. And there's ways to reveal ourselves and still be permission givers while really giving obvious outs. That it's not, it doesn't have to become an excuse of like, I can't share any of myself, or I have to just pretend to be, happy all the time because I don't want to offend them or violate, into their space because they're trapped. So the rough day scenario sucks, because then you feel accountable to problem solve for the other person if they struggle or have a shitty boss or a colleague. I don't. So I'm just going to say that we all still really have a choice there. Like, someone can have, many people that I know, when they say like, I had a really rough day, the main thing that they want from many of the people in their life is for them to say like, man, I'm so sorry that it was rough. And many of us often want to jump in and either help or fix or these things. And like over and over and over again, what I hear is like, most people don't want that. I mostly don't want it. Even those of us who will often jump in to fix are like, that's not what I want when I share about I had a rough day. So I think it's important to really take ownership for the part of us that feels accountable to that. When all somebody said is, man, I had a rough day. How was your day? And they didn't say like I'm having a horrible time with my boss and I really need your help to figure out what to do about how to change my job. Most people haven't said that. So, it's like, that's just a place to take some personal responsibility. Like, oh, I'm suddenly feeling pressure or a desire or some compulsion or impulse to support them or help them or coach them or make them feel better. And that's mine. That is mine. And again, I say that with no blame, shame, judgment, and again, obviously not even like here in person for me to ask questions too. So it's never even really about the person who makes the comment. It's just me getting to bounce off of somebody who was willing to step in and be vulnerable and reveal. So I appreciate that. Whoa, I see you were saying when they asked for your name and put the wrong one down. I have such a weird name that I gave up long ago. Kendra's not so bad. People have gotten fairly good with Kendra, but Kunav, just like, I mean, of course at Starbucks they don't ask for your last name, but like it breaks the automated telephone thing, you know, when you say your name and they're like, Kendra Kunav, would, you know, like just like, so I just gave that up like long ago. But it can seem very impersonal. I mean, I definitely hear what you're saying, like where that's asked for, but then, you know, it's just on to like whatever they happened to hear. You know, with all those things, I think like just play with it. Again, this is one of those like in Relationship by Design, it's kind of like, so how can I be respectful here and also make this fun, you know, fun for me and for everybody. So I think there's lots of ways to just work within these realms. All right. Thank you so much to those of you who are here with me live, anyone watching the replay. And, you know, even if it is the replay and I'm not here live, I still always love questions, shares, comments. And I always love to come back in and respond after the fact and keep some of this dialogue up. I will also put the link for Relationship by Design Fundamentals in the comments. There's only 3 more days to register for this round. I don't know when I will teach this again. It's different than some of my other programs because it is live, and I do that like on purpose so that we can really work in this way and be in dialogue, and I can hear what's really going on for you and offer you maybe some practices to take in your life, and then we can meet again and bring it back in about like, well, how did that go and what came up for you and what was their response? And so there's 4 live calls. There will be live coaching on all the calls. So for any of you that feel called to that, I'll put that link in, and now's the time. Now's the time to register. I would absolutely love to have you there. Ciao for now.